Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the latest edition of the Radcast. It is our part 2 in a 2-part series on the impact, of neuro and Super Bowl ads and all things brainy stuff with our very own Tyler Lewis, Director of Client Solutions at NeuroInsight. And I'm just taking the liberty there, calling our very own. I feel like you're a buddy now, Tyler, but he is with NeuroInsight. So great to have you again, Tyler.
Hey, happy to be here and happy to be considered part of the family.
You are part of the family, especially having the cooler liquor bar in the background for anyone watching the video. We were talking pre-episode about getting up there and sharing a scotch maybe on one of these episodes, so we're going to make that happen when things come to life. But we also have here with us the creative director at Radcast, Mike Weston. Mike, welcome to the show again.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be here.
Tyler. And Josh.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Josh. Hello. Our digital media manager here at Radcast, Josh Hill. Good to be here. Even your very own host is allowed to have a hiccup every now and then. You know, in producing 120 shows plus now, even my brain has a freeze every now and then. But Tyler, I'm really looking forward to it. We've been anxious to look at the results from the Super Bowl. We talked last time about the impact of advertising and how we've traditionally viewed quote unquote success of ads during the Super Bowl and the somewhat arbitrary notion of, ones we like, you don't like, the focus groups of one, as we like to call it. And then, of course, the old ad meter. But we're pretty anxious, man. I know we're not going to give away just yet, but can you answer this much? Were you surprised by any of the results we're going to talk about today?
Absolutely. I think one of the things we touched on a little bit last week and that we'll expand upon this week is the fact that the ad meter within the industry, especially in the brand side, is usually the advertiser's Super Bowl rating system, right? They want to know how all of these consumers are rating their ads on a 0 to 10 scale or 1 to 10 scale. And typically what we tend to see is ads that perform high in the ad meter typically don't perform well neurologically. So in terms of my level of surprise, I'm not surprised by what we see because we see a similar trend this year. And, some of the things that we'll discuss may surprise you guys a little bit more than it's surprised me because, we typically are going to be seeing the best performing ads on ad meter show fairly low memory encoding for the branding and vice versa.
Well, that's somewhat surprising, but not surprising. I think it's in the ad world that we live in. We sometimes get in love with our own sauce, so to speak. Is that a fair? Yeah, myopic. There we go, Mike. I think sometimes we fall in love with our own ideas, and what seems seemingly. And I know you've never done that, right? Yeah, once or twice. But what seems funny or interesting or has a celebrity, we think is naturally what's going to stick in the brain and be resonant. But that's not always the case.
Exactly. And the fairly common themes that we tend to see within the Super Bowl is, use of emotion, whether it's comedy, drama, sadness, use of social issues, say things like, especially this year, COVID-19, or political issues that were generally avoided for the most part. The use of animals, comedy with those animals, use of celebrity, which usually will tend to overshadow the brand itself, and athletes in general. We saw a lot of these themes come out once again. Also, the use of nostalgia is a big one that we saw. But, a lot of that does tend to overshadow the true brand story, which as we start to take a look at these results, we'll see some of those common Super Bowl themes overshadow the brand response and take away from that memory encoding and ROI for the brands that invested over $5.5 million in their spots in the Super Bowl this year.
So I'll roundtable this one. It's funny how fleeting ads and everything is. We kind of move from one thing to the other really quickly. But for everyone, have you seen either in just your own periphery, either through social or through seeing the ads again, or any discussion amongst friends or others? Has there been any kind of commentary over all observation, like post Super Bowl with any of these campaigns? Josh, I'll start with you.
Yeah, on social media, there's always the day after you're going to see a lot of talk, and then it's going to trickle out, and then you always see maybe 2 or 3 ads actually continue to be talked about. And I saw the Bruce Springsteen Jeep one kind of went out. People were talking about it up through Thursday, and at least in my feeds on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. But what I'm still seeing today is the Oatly ad. That one, for some reason, I keep seeing people talking about it, mentioning it, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. That's kind of now the only one I see still.
Mike, about you?
I haven't had a lot of discussions with people since the day of the big game. It's funny to bring up Bruce because, I don't know, obviously the world knows now that a week before he flew out to BFE, wherever he went to shoot commercial, Nebraska, Kansas, he got pinched for DUI. And that led ultimately, it was almost the excuse for yanking the spot. So he blew .02, which is nothing.
This is Bruce?
Bruce. He apparently took a little ride up to Sandy Hook, which, Tyler, Sandy Hook is, you can see the city from there. It's a beautiful stretch of beach in Jersey. It's a federal park. And a park ranger caught him doing a shot of tequila with some fans. It's notable because it was January and he was riding his Harley in Triumph. So I commend him for that, but he blew a .02, which outside of the park is fine, right? But in the park, he got a DUI. And apparently Chrysler used that opportunity to yank the ad, use that as an excuse to yank the ad. When in point of fact, they were getting a lot of negative reaction. It was a very polarizing ad, as we can all expect in this time of day. But I thought it was interesting that Chrysler said that's the reason, not because half the country hated the spot. It's because Bruce blew a .02 in a state park or a federal park.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be extremely careful, and you bring that up now. There's a recent campaign that was released by P&G that features Chris Harrison from The Bachelor, who recently has had a little bit of a drama in his life too. And they had to yank that right away. It was ironic. The day that ad was supposed to be released was the day that he also had some controversy in his life. So, you got to be real careful about those characters as well.
He was talking, and I'm not going to get into supporting or not supporting him or anything, but the irony was just that he was talking about cancel culture, and he got canceled, and he probably very well deserved to be stuck his foot in his mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Very ignorant comments, given were his position. So I don't condone anything he did, but just the irony of him talking about canceling. Well, you need to watch what you say, buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But but it's, I hadn't heard the Bruce Springsteen story, though. The .02.
.02.
Man, I mean, I might get that with the mouthwash I use in the morning.
Exactly.
I mean, if I got pulled over every time, I leave the house, I might be in trouble.
I think Josh brought up one key point too, is in terms of measuring effectiveness of advertisements. Social is also a big signifier, or a lot of brands use social as a signifier of ROI after the Super Bowl, right? Now, the quote unquote brand winners of the Super Bowl were 1, Mountain Dew, and 2, Pepsi, 2 PepsiCo brands. Well, if you look into it, Mountain Dew had a competition to within their ad asking consumers to tweet the number of Mountain Dew cans or bottles they saw within the advertisement, and they had a chance to win $1 million. Now, the question is that a long-lasting impact for Mountain Dew, or is that just a flash in the pan? And I think what Josh brings up about Oatly is going to be something we talk about a little bit later here, about that longevity of emotion, that longevity of driving memory encoding for your brand, that even though this ad, not to give too much away, this Oatly ad was commonly criticized for being the worst creative in the entire Super Bowl, it does have long-lasting power.
Yep. As your host might have suggested last week, been doing this ad business too long. I even know what my brain is not supposed to be thinking is thinking about thinking.
You know, it's ironic that spot was created in-house.
Yeah.
No agency
It
was
is an old spot
involved.
too.
Yeah.
About 6 years old.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was the CEO either.
Yeah, I thought it was filmed in the country.
Huh?
You said it now.
Yeah.
Out in the field, yeah.
I get it.
Where's our morning radio soundboard?
Yeah, I know. Hey, I do want to get into Tyler. Let's talk about transitioning into the neuro side. In contrary to ad meter. How is the success? What's the process? What is kind of the measurement story for you guys for how all this kind of comes together?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're going to start at the base here where, much of the brain's processing occurs in the subconscious, right? So, we have about 90% of our processing is going to happen in this unconscious mind that we can't directly pull out after seeing an advertisement or even while we're watching something. The brain is an automatic device that is consistently firing in response to stimuli that you're exposed to, right? The other 10% is conscious processing, which is things that you can measure with recall or things that you can measure with asking people questions or surveys. Well, we specialize in what we do is we measure brain response with a headset that is patented and unique to NeuroInsight that can look at the heat or the different parts of the brain that are more or less active on the surface of the brain and correlate that to specific neurometrics that have been identified to be important for understanding how people are actually processing the content that they're exposed to. So we measure a few key metrics that are important for this processing. Everything revolves around what we call memory encoding. Now, memory encoding is a measure of what is actively being laid down into memory. And memory encoding is broken out into two different parts. One is measured in the left hemisphere of the brain, which is called detail memory encoding. And that's memory encoding for details, call to action, very, very detail-oriented things. It's very straightforward. Global memory encoding is more of an emotional memory encoding that allows us to measure how people are responding to big picture themes. And this is measured in the right hemisphere of the brain. So going back to, say, sixth grade neuroscience or sixth grade science, really, not neuroscience, understanding left brain versus right brain things, this is what we're measuring here. In addition to that, we have some diagnostic measures that help us kind of paint the full picture of how people are responding to things that they're watching. Now, we're looking at things like approach withdrawal, which is a positivity or negativity of emotional response, whether people lean in or lean out from things. We also measure emotional intensity, which is a measurement of how much people are experiencing emotion in the moment, which is an understanding of, or a multiplier for that approach withdrawal response. Another thing that's fairly important to us is engagement, which is a measure of how engaged people are and also how relevant content is to the consumer or to that target demographic. And then we have attentional measures, which help us identify how much attention people are paying to the content in real time. Now, all of this is measured on a second-by-second basis, which allows us to paint a dynamic picture of how people are responding to that content as they see it. Because if you think about any movie that you've seen or anything that you were exposed to throughout the day, you can't physically or evolutionarily remember every single thing you're exposed to. So this allows us to identify those moments that are going to stick out in users' minds or consumers' minds, and then optimize against those elements to understand whether or not one branding is going through, and then use those key elements to drive branding through to the consumers.
So to be clear, we're talking through the lens of Super Bowl ads, but everything you just stated is universal to how you guys measure ads in general, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
And just since I asked that question, randomly speaking, you guys have been doing this long enough in comparison. Is there differences in how the brain responds to Super Bowl ads versus any other type of ad or advertising period? It seems like that would drive some, the semblance of where you are, how you are, and how attentive we are to the ads compared to, a typical moment where you're kind of in and out of, I think, paying attention to what it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Context is super important. And I think it all starts with, first of all, looking at the power of the creative and the amount of money that's being invested into Super Bowl advertisements. I think Super Bowl ads and just generally Super Bowl ads are just garnering more investment than, your typical everyday advertisement. So there's much higher production quality, which leads to a different type of response to that type of content. For example, if we're watching TV, right now, you would see an ad that's probably fairly product focused, doesn't really feature any celebrities, and is focused on, say, the Tide bottle or whatever like method of action or benefit you're going to get from that product. Whereas a Super Bowl ad is going to feature, a celebrity director potentially, a celebrity in the ad, a lot of higher production qualities. Potentially looks like it's produced by Michael Bay, which is going to take away from the product itself. So typically what we tend to see is different parts of the brain are going to interact with these different types of advertisements in a way that influences how people are responding. So we have this theory called the neurostate theory. And the neurostate theory states that, there's a bias either left or right brain, or there's either a left or right brain bias that influences how people are processing information. The former advertisement that I was describing that's more detail oriented, that is all about the product, is likely to drive a left brain bias and is likely to drive a more detail oriented response in the brain. Whereas a Super Bowl ad is likely to drive a higher right brain bias because you have all this higher production quality and you have these celebrities or these more creative elements, if you will, that could potentially take away from branding. So it's important to strike a good balance when we're looking at and assessing these Super Bowl ads to understand, one, at the very base, how people are responding to the creative. And then you mentioned context, right? Within the context of the Super Bowl, most people are involved in the game in a very emotional way. We're talking about, maybe fans of the game, fans of the sport, fans of the teams. You're with a bunch of friends. This is the culmination of, the most popular sport in the US, with 96.1 million viewers this year, right? So everybody is involved in this. So the context is also going to drive the emotion of the game. And we typically tend to see a higher emotional response to Super Bowl advertisements and the Super Bowl in general when compared to other general. Then you consider the cultural relevance, right? When we talk about the number of viewers, obviously you're also going to have a lot of cultural impact that is going to impact how people are responding to the content and how people are driving or building their campaigns within which you are placing your advertising campaign. And the next thing is, the campaign itself. You have to understand, how to differentiate yourself from the different ads within the space, which is another strong impact on that brain response. So typically we see that Super Bowl ads will be more memorable than most ads in our database, but won't be memorable for the right reasons, right? The more memorable ads that drive branding are the ones that are going to be very brand focused.
I love it. You guys were ever going to do a commercial for yourselves, and I don't know that ever makes sense given how niche you are, but I always go back to the this is your brain.
Yeah.
Brain on drugs.
Right.
This is your brain on ads. That's a freebie. You guys can have that.
I'm going to use that.
And you should do like if you were going to do a TikTok video, do with an egg, you know.
Yeah.
But you have to think about what would be the analogy of the brain on that. I'm not sure.
Man.
Well, I think
That is the commercial I think of every time I make eggs, though.
No, remember that campaign, Mike?
Very well. I wonder if half the people that work for us would.
Yeah, well, that was like from the late 80s, like early 90s. The war on drugs.
Partnership for Drug-Free America.
Yeah, now we're in the war on ads. No one ads don't work on me. Yeah, they don't. Well, I think it's time to remove some of the drama. I'm really ready to get into where we landed. Are we ready to get into it, Tom?
Sure, absolutely. And I think to kind of start off, what I would like to do is share with you guys an example of how we were talking about how traditional research doesn't specifically line up with neuro research. So I'm going to share with you guys a case study, a quick overview of, an ad we tested years ago in one of our validation studies. So there was an ad that we tested for the brand Cadbury, which was a UK-based ad, a UK-based brand at the time, which used a very creative approach to promoting their brand. Now, this ad had the song "In the Air Tonight" by Phil Collins in the background, and had a gorilla featured on the drums that played the drums at the drum solo of "In the Air Tonight." Now, I'm assuming, most of our, millennial plus viewers or listeners know the song "In the Air Tonight," where Phil Collins has that big drum solo in the middle. At that time, the gorilla plays the drums, then Cadbury comes in and shows its branding. Now, this advertisement was tested in traditional market research. And what was shown in the traditional research was, focus groups said, when compared to UK TV ad test norms, that this ad was not easy to understand, was not relevant, had a negative correlation on persuasion and how much it tells you about the brand. And furthermore, the director of marketing at the time was basically told that, quote, "You are never showing this ad." But they showed it anyways, right? And, I would assume it's probably because, CGI gorillas were not cheap at the time. They invested a lot of money into this campaign already. Despite the market research results, they've released it. And what happened in market was dairy milk sales increased by 9% while this ad was in market, despite those results that we just saw. The ad won a Grand Prix Lyon. Reported brand favorability went up by 20% while this ad was in market. And the song, this is my favorite stat, the song "In the Air Tonight," despite not being re-released, climbed up to number 14 on the UK singles charts and was number 3 on iTunes. And this advertisement is typically highly regarded still to this day as one of the best ads of all time, despite those market research results. So that kind of goes to show, one, like, okay, we see this disconnect between, how people are responding to the ad meter and how we drive effectiveness. And this kind of sets it up for the rest of what we're going to talk about as well. So when we focus in on our detailed memory encoding metric, which is our key metric for understanding, it's our key KPI for understanding whether or not an ad is effective or not, we tend to see a few things when we look at the results for this Cadbury Gorilla ad. What we see is, the brain is trying to process things in real time, specifically looking at these different scenes that may be driving impact. And within the specific ad itself, what we saw using our methodology was, given the brain is trying to pick up on the story, the brain picks up on 1, the gorilla, 2, the gorilla on the drums playing the drum solo, and then 3, the branding. And this is a very simple advertisement that, again, people did not equate to Cadbury, but drove impact for the brand. And our metric was able to pick that out, specifically showing effectiveness at that branding moment for Cadbury, whereas, traditional research was not able to show this, which shows that subconscious is that key driver for impacting sales and markets.
I love it. I remember. Do you remember that campaign? I remember
the ad.
It ran. I don't even know if it ran in the U.S. Did it run in the U.S.? like, because I remember seeing and reading about it being in the ad game, but I know it was a UK campaign, and I remember seeing this thing. It was
No, I never ran
that. Maybe because I love Phil Collins. I don't know which one it is, but
I mean, it ran in the show books, and that's why we're all familiar with it. But Tyler, two things.
Yeah.
Number one, you're the first person I've ever heard outside of France call it a Lyon. And secondly, how long is NeuroInsights and this technology? I'm sure it's evolved. Of course it's evolved.
Sure.
How long have you guys been around? 10 years?
Yeah, so we started in Australia 20 years ago. Our founder, Dr. Richard Silberstein, was doing research into memory, and specifically how memory influences learning disability, and how people with learning disability were responding differently to different types of content, and brought our technology into the advertising space to help fund some of his research. So he was looking to understand memory and saw its value to the advertising world, because we were assessing how people were just remembering stories. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, is we're trying to figure out how people are putting together stories in their minds, because we understand that, we can't physically, or again, evolutionarily, like, put together an entire story from front to back. We have to have these little key elements that help make up that story for us. So he brought it to the advertising space 20 years ago. We've been in the US now for, feels like forever, 10 years. And I've been around for 7 of those years, going on 8 here. Yep.
The gorilla, though, was quite an accomplishment. Like, I mean, I'd like to sit in on the creative briefing, or the, just the...
You'd kill it. You'd never get out of the room.
Me? I wouldn't kill it. You brought that kind of idea, we'd be singing it.
I'd be in the monkey costume.
Don't hold your breath.
Yeah. The client might try to kill us.
And what's interesting about this creative, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the Oatly creative, is, there were a lot of knockoffs, right? A lot of people tried to replicate this, but, once it's done, you can't replicate it, right? People are used to the formula. They get used to, the song and dance plus branding. And there tends to be a bunch of knockoffs that just really fail in market. So this was incredible. This was incredible, like, market creativity in itself, because it was able to do so well for the brand. And really, given, the knockoffs or the pretenders that came out, can't be replicated unless, it's far enough in the rearview mirror that somebody picks it up again.
We have a saying around here, and it came from Bartle Bogle Haggerty. I think it was John Bogle, famous British ad guy. And what he said was, and it's true of the industry, creativity is determined by the obscurity of your sources.
Mm-hmm.
So and I know we creatives are notorious for that, and the ad industry as a whole is kind of the epitome of imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Right.
But we still have 3,400 celebrity commercials on every Super Bowl ad.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, also
it's a formula,
and also with the same cadence as well. I think that's the thing. Is there are a lot of Super Bowl ads that came out this year that we'll talk about as well, that maybe won the ad meter, but are the same song and dance as we've previously seen. Yeah. Whether it's like cut scene, like 5 jokes, cut scenes between like different situational things, and throw in branding. You've already lost people after your third cut scene to your third joke. That's the same joke that you've been repeating throughout the 60-second piece. Right. And then as we talk about the Amazon ad today as well, Amazon has been very repetitive in their creative structure as well, which is, again, just featuring a celebrity in these different situations, and you wear out the viewer by the time you get to branding, and you can't effectively brand.
Well, again, I think we're ready to get
Let's go.
What's our first teed up one as far as how it performed in the test?
Yeah, we're gonna start with my favorite, and the winner loser of the Super Bowl, which is the Oatly advertisement. So, yeah, we'll start with the good stuff here. So, just to kind of tee it up, this Oatly advertisement was originally shot in 2014 in Sweden. It was banned. It was banned in Sweden because of some of the dairy farmers. I forget the exact reason, but basically there was some dairy farm legislation that led to the banning of this advertisement because it's all about wow, no cap. So they had this in their back pocket for a while. And, as the Super Bowl was kind of coming up and with ad sales being down for the Super Bowl this year, it seems like they were able to get a discounted spot. We don't know the exact number, but that's the theory behind it, is they were able to get a discounted spot. And they decided without any time to build a new creative, they just re-released this one. And this ad was the lowest performer on the ad meter, was one of the most talked about ads on social, and as Josh said, is still one of the most talked about ads on social. And Josh, actually, before we even dive into it, would love to hear some of your thoughts, and just before we even show the results, would love to hear what you guys think of this advertisement overall.
I love it. I thought it was like a great placement, being so unique and polarizing, to where it's like sitting amongst all the other ads during the Super Bowl. It just stuck out all the more. And I think that's why people noticed it and hated it so much. But even every time I saw it mentioned, even if someone was hating it, someone would always be replying, or tweeting back, or commenting and saying, well, I actually loved it. And someone else would be like, why? This is so stupid. And they would just continue on this long conversation about it.
Yeah.
And I saw people changing their mind, but anytime you have a piece of content online that's being interacted with like that, the algorithm's going to love it. They're going to try to get more people to get interacted, get involved. So they're going to push that to the top. So it kind of almost need it to have some kind of controversy, or some kind of something able, if your ad's not able to be talked about other than, yeah, I liked it, it's funny, and it's not really it's not going to stick around on social media.
Right. Yeah.
I just want to know how many of us actually went out and bought Oatly.
Oh, I'm already a customer.
Is that yours in the fridge?
Yeah.
That stuff's nasty.
Are you sampling everyone's stuff there?
Oh, occasionally I run out of my almond creamer occasionally, and looking for a substitute. I tried Oatly.
That may have been a prop. We filmed a tech talk, and I think we watered it down.
We secretly replaced your creamer with. You did what?
It's definitely the luxury of
informal qualitative survey though, right? I'm at a gathering, Super Bowl, and everyone stopped to watch it.
Yep.
And once listen, back to your point, Tyler. Advertising is an excuse to go up and get coffee or do something else. Typically, right. Super Bowl, everybody stopped to watch the commercials.
Absolutely.
And everybody to a person was like, God, that was stupid. Mm-hmm. There wasn't anybody that liked it. And it reminded me of the E-Trade commercial probably, 15 years ago. And it was a monkey in a garage with a bunch of these crazy characters that they spent, I'm sure, weeks casting.
Right.
And there was no point to it, just this crazy thing going on. And the announcer at the end says, well, we just blew $3 million. And it was E-Trade, and it was bizarre to be bizarre.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think
again, the first 3 seconds, I was like, oh God, CEO want to be in it. And I mentioned last week, I knew there was intent in it being as bad as it was. That was what it was on purpose for. And the fact of the matter is, I actually went to the store and was going to buy it. Where I was at didn't have it. And I was like, but I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
So it was worrying me. I was like, I got to try this. Might be my craziness of appreciating the marketing side of it. But think about it. I haven't seen that ad since. I don't watch a ton of TV, but I watch enough news. I think I would have caught it. I don't know that they even have a campaign running, because again, you would turn it. you know, but it worked because it was a Super Bowl and you couldn't turn it. And so they knew it would resonate with you, even if seemingly perceived negative. It was doing something to your brain.
I want to see how many views it's got on YouTube. Right? I mean, watching.
Sure, that's a great question.
Their sales are that'll be 30 days sales.
So the big thing, at least we do have a stat, and I don't know the exact percentage, but you know, I've seen that their search results or their searches have been up over at least 15 to 19% since the Super Bowl, which is, you know, fairly massive considering like one, the product, but two, like that in comparison to some of the other brands in the Super Bowl. So people have been looking for it, people have been searching for it, and I'm sure there's going to be a case study down the line that actually is able to identify the sales numbers as well, and, you know, equate that back to, you know, the spike that we saw during the Super Bowl from this advertisement. Cool. So let's take a look at these results. So I think the one thing as before we show the advertisement itself is, you know, one, remember that we're looking at detailed memory encoding, and specifically memory encoding at key moments, and like remembering like or understanding like what people are committing to memory. And the thing about this advertisement, it's a product focused advertisement. It's a little weird, a little strange, almost has a similar vibe to the Cadbury Gorilla advertisement, which is very song based. But this features the ad or features the brand more prominently. And then once we see branding throughout the ad, but also at end branding, it builds a big story for the brand. And people are like, oh, what the heck is this? No cow. This is Oatly. You know, it works. It's so quirky, it works. So let's go ahead and play it. So as this guy's singing about the ad or singing about the brand, people are trying to pick up on what's going on. We have this slow zoom out, and memory encoding is coinciding with these different elements as more of the story is being shown. But once the brand comes on screen and we have the brand featured very prominently on screen, we see memory encoding within the 99th percentile of our entire database, right? So when we have this Oatly end card, people are committing Oatly to memory, which memory is going to drive some sort of consumer behavior later on. So that's why we're seeing this big spike in people talking about Oatly. And what you'll see on social media is people aren't just saying, you know, that ad with the guy in the brown shirt playing the keyboard. People are saying that Oatly advertisement. And that's what has staying power in this context. It's so weird. It sticks out amongst all the other celebrities, all the other emotions that people are trying to drive home. And it features the brand prominently in a way very similar to the Cadbury ad that we just looked at. Not surprised. I mean, you called it.
Well, I just knew that it was such a departure from everything else we were seeing.
Right.
That it had to be resonating in some way. And I bet you their sales. It just seemed like.
Oh yeah.
Because people are even though they're like, man, that commercial sucked. They're like, the recall is there, so they're going to see that label in the grocery store wherever it's available. The recall's there. It's kind of like, and it's kind of that kind of product anyway. Because, you know, you're like, you know, coffee and different things that you put in coffee. That's such a hot category, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
So a new type of thing that you would never consider, you know, like, I don't know, I think it's brilliant.
So does that blow up reach and frequency? Because it's only run once for all intents and purposes, unless you seek it out, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. No, absolutely.
Go ahead. Beforehand, I was familiar with the brand beforehand just because they spend most of their marketing budget behind stickers and T-shirts and posters in coffee shops. And so they had always had
Josh is our official coffee snob.
Yeah. So they always had the quirky stuff of like say no to milk or something, and they had like over the urinals at a shop down the road. They had posters that said they'll put a Oatly ad anywhere these days.
Or if they were already doing the irreverent.
I wonder if it gets into back to an old episode of getting away from the mass branding of they're not trying to make Oatly this big prestigious like brand idea. It's CEO just hanging out. He's like, the energy of it was kind of like, hey, Oatly, we don't have milk, it's oats.
Well, I think you bring up a interesting kind of sidebar there when you're talking about, trying not to make it a big prestigious brand. We see a similar thing. Maybe this is something we can discuss at some other time, but just the idea of micro influencers versus macro influencers, right?
Yeah.
We tend to see a lot more success with micro influencers because, you have this dichotomy between, how much people think about the brand versus how much people think about the celebrity, right? So with the macro influencer, you tend to see, much more popularity for that influencer. Say it's like Drake and State Farm versus the brand itself. And we'll see an example of this in the next time series that I'll show you. But then in this case, we have the CEO. We don't know who he is, and this brand who we barely know, but we maybe know the brand a little bit more. But it also puts the brand on a stage that's equivalent to the individual who is, portraying or who's telling the story. That makes a greater impact for the brand overall during end branding.
Well, I don't know. If just purely by the amount of time we spent on them, I think we validated.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Hey, look,
you emphasized. What's number 2 on our list there?
This is actually paid for by Oatly.
The Radcast. These episodes brought to you by Oatly.
Yeah, we got advertisers. Let's go.
Yeah.
So the next one is Rocket Mortgage. This was number 1. So we're going straight from the bottom on the ad meter all the way up to the top. Now, this is an example of an attention vampire being, the celebrity within the advertisement. So what we're going to show you in the things that we want to kind of focus on here is within this advertisement, we got Tracy Morgan being featured in various different lights. It's a very snappy ad. He's kind of going from like place to place to place to place, kind of what I was describing earlier. It's very montagey. And by the end, the consumers wore out. But another thing that you see is you have Tracy Morgan featured throughout the entire creative. And then once you get to the end branding statement, you have a change in narrator. It goes to a very ad heavy sort of message, and people completely check out because they see it's an ad. They're like, oh crap, I don't want to be here anymore. So we're going to go ahead and share this with you. And then, I'll kind of narrate over top as well. And Tracy Morgan is one of my favorite attention vampires by far, like, I understand why he did well in this one. So as the ad opens up with his family, we get to Tracy Morgan, and he's sitting there in the bathtub talking about Rocket Mortgage. But then it just cuts between different scenes, and people are trying to catch up the entire time. It's very fast paced.
What did he say? Almost the same, almost as good as. What was the reprise? every vignette had, well, almost, right?
Yep. You're almost there. And then you get to this moment here. He jumps over the bridge. That's a climax. And you stop. People check out.
I'm seeing, and if you're this is definitely going to be one of those when you're listening, you need to go watch the YouTube to get the full aspect of watching the creative. But imagining that you're watching the Tracy Morgan Rocket Mortgage ad and the, what was it, almost maybe or
almost as good, almost the same, almost.
But
are these parachutes? Well, they're almost as good, right? Wasn't that it? Almost as good.
Close enough.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yeah, they're almost there. So I mean, those are two examples of one, where celebrity can overshadow everything, whereas like featuring the brand in a way that puts the brand first allows you to, tell a better story. Now we've seen this multiple times, and I'll just kind of share I guess war stories at this point, where in some of these other ads that we saw, Amazon Alexa, same thing with the Amazon Alexa ad. What you see is various montages, very similar to the Rocket Mortgage ad, where you have Michael B. Jordan is taking the place of Alexa, and the female protagonist is dreaming of Michael B. Jordan being in the Alexa the entire time. So she's just like dreamily talking, saying, Alexa, do this, Alexa, do that, da da da. And every single time it's like, she's in various positions that, Michael B. Jordan takes off his shirt at some point. Michael B. Jordan does this. And it's a better advertisement for Michael B. Jordan than it is for Alexa. We've seen this in every single Drake ad that we've tested. Drake is a big attention vampire. People love Drake, not the brand that he's associated with. But then you go to another ad from this year that did really well, but was number 44 on the ad meter, was Pringles. Pringles just told a very cute, fun story. Was a fairly engaging story, but featured the brand in a way that put their brand front and center, and was very important to them to put their brand front and center because they just went through a big rebrand, and they just rebranded in mid-December. And that was actually very effective for them. Now people were able to see this logo front and center and see the new Pringles logo and the new Pringles branding, and were able to remember it. So they did a really good job. The Super Bowl was a success for them, despite not performing well in the ad meter. It was a success for Oatly, despite not performing well in the ad meter, but was not so much for the big brands like Rocket Mortgage or Amazon, or say like an M&M's or others that invested a ton in their advertising as well and did not perform as well on our metrics.
What's interesting is the weekend, you did not get paid to do the Super Bowl. I heard this, and most years I was not aware of this fact about the Super Bowl. Most of the time, the acts are unpaid at the Super Bowl. That was news to me, but made sense to me because of the reach and awareness that they get for their performance. So it's no different here, except whoever's agents for Tracy Morgan and any of these other celebrities should get paid extra because those actors are getting paid and they're becoming the stars of the commercial. So they're getting double of the awareness and they get paid.
Absolutely. 100%. And, the best example of, a happy medium between, say, celebrity and brand is an advertisement that we worked on a couple of years ago. There was an advertisement in 2018, and kind of talking back to NeuroInsight and where we kind of come into the fold. We tested a rough cut for our clients at Stella Artois, which was an advertisement that featured a lot of nostalgia, celebrity, and branding. And their goal was to ensure that they're able to maximize their branding within the story to ensure that they're getting the most out of their advertising, right? Anheuser-Busch, on average, spends, upwards of, at least 20 to 30 million on advertisements, considering like 5.5 million Super Bowl advertisements per year, considering 5.5 million per ad, have at least 6 advertisements per Super Bowl. So within the Stella Artois ad, they feature, Carrie Bradshaw walking out. And, they have the Sex and the City theme. Carrie Bradshaw flips her hair. She sits down and is asked in this restaurant whether she's going to have the usual that being a Cosmopolitan. Well, she switches up the usual and orders a Stella Artois. Then it cuts to a big Stella Artois cutscene where we see very strong, prominent response to the brand, to Stella Artois. Then the ad kind of cuts, and then we see Jeff Bridges come in. And it's another replication of the same, kind of storyline, which is Jeff Bridges, do you want to have the usual? He said, which is a white Russian. He says, no, I'm going to have a Stella Artois. Then, all hell breaks loose. And then they feature the brand again, and they have strong branding for Stella. And within this test that we were doing, we were looking at how they can feature Stella more prominently to increase their impact post Super Bowl. And to use neuro in our second response effectively, you have to identify, again, as we were saying, those key moments and those key elements where the brand can be seamlessly integrated into the creative without actually taking away from the storyline itself. Now, on the back end of the Super Bowl, after we did this optimization for them, what Stella saw was purchase frequency increased by 15.1% post Super Bowl, Stella also showed the highest growth in consideration across the entire beer category post Super Bowl. The ad itself had 7.6 billion impressions, 418,000 social mentions because they're featuring the Big Lebowski, the dude from the Big Lebowski. It was the number 9 most memorable brand in the Super Bowl and number 9 favorite ad. So, we can use this technology to understand like how to tell stories in a way that features the brand most prominently to ensure that, brands are actually driving that ROI.
There's always a good way and a wrong way to do something.
Exactly.
So I think that's all for the ad review, is it not, Tyler?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any final thoughts from everyone as we kind of close this out, as our look at the impact of neuro in both just the Super Bowl context and the context overall? What does it make you think, Mike, from a creative point of view? Make you think differently about creating the ad?
Makes me thirsty. I want Stella. No, it makes perfect sense. And I loved earlier you made the right and left analogy too. But my question to you is, so we knew that Nielsen would supply families at home with buttons, right, that they would click. Remember back in the day to test shows, TV shows, not necessarily ads. What are your subjects doing? Are you hooking them up with electrodes? I mean,
yep.
It's not answering your question, but it's for my edification. I want to know how does it happen?
Yeah, so people wear a headset that almost looks like a shower cap with electrodes embedded within the shower cap. These electrodes sit at different parts of the brain, and each electrode measures the amount of activity underneath where it sits in the brain. So we have people come in groups of, at these times we're doing smaller focus groups, but groups of 4, and we put these caps on their heads, and we're measuring their activity as they watch TV. So, if we're doing a Super Bowl test, they'll watch the Super Bowl and watch ads embedded within the Super Bowl context. And, we don't prime people before they come in. They just come in, sit down like they would for a normal focus group and just watch TV with these caps on. We don't ask any questions, and we send them on their way after they're finished.
Don't take any pictures of me. They're sitting in the shower caps.
No. No, the only side effect is they're going to walk out with maybe some messy hair, but
Are they compensated for it?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So we drive people in like you would any focus group, and we'll compensate them for their time, and it's fairly simple. It's actually much easier. I've hosted qualitative groups. It's much simpler than doing a qualitative group because I don't have to talk to anybody either.
Yeah, and you don't have the alpha male or female in the room either.
Right, exactly.
I'll get you a group. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about M&Ms? Are there M&Ms? Those M&Ms there too?
Yep. Oh yeah. I love. Yeah. You always have the individuals who are always asking for the bags of chips or extra bags of chips.
It's fascinating. It's heady stuff. Don't pardon the pun.
Yeah.
Josh, any final thoughts?
I love this tech. It's really fun.
Yep.
Makes you kind of watch things differently, and especially the thinking of like attention vampires. I think a lot of times it doesn't even have to be a human to be a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the future, your future business model should be around how people's brain responds to listening to podcasts. Certain ones.
Yeah. Right. Look, we've done some research on the podcast world. We can, give you some insights. I'll tell you what, people do love podcasts. To get very meta with it, guys. We've seen that, podcasts are an engaging realm and just audio in general because it forces the brain to kind of wander in a way that, forcing a visual in front of somebody's face doesn't.
Yeah. Theater of the mind, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
It's awesome.
Well, we really enjoyed this 2-part series with Tyler Lewis, Director of Client Solutions at NeuroInsight. Tyler, where can everybody keep up with all things? I know we did this last week, but in case someone's tuning in this week, where can they keep up with everything with NeuroInsight?
Absolutely. You can find us at neuroinsight.com. We're at NeuroInsight on LinkedIn, and we're at neuro_insight on Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Josh. And you know where to find us. We're at theradcast.com and at the.rad.cast on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Ryan Alford, and we'll see you next time.